Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/Everglades Moon, or Twitter, @EMLC-tweets.
Hi everyone, this is Lady Bridget, and welcome to episode 21, Beltane 2016. We're going to start off the podcast with my article, 10 Tips for Writing Good Ritual, followed by a song, First Fruits, by Aradia, from her album Songs for All Seasons. Then Qabal will give us FooDoo and teach us all about making rice pudding. We'll have Pandie's Pagan projects about making a Beltane candle. Canu shares a song with us called The Oak King. And then Lord Riekin's segment, It'll Grow on You, where he presents spring pruning. Then Shaylee shares with us her segment, Nice Witch, on participation in ritual. And then we'll end the podcast with a song by Mama Gina called Binding Wood, which is from her new album entitled I Remember Love. You can find out more about Mama Gina and purchase her music at www.mamagina.com. That's MAMAGINA.com. I hope you enjoy, and happy Beltane. Hi, this is Lady Bridget, and I'd like to bring you 10 tips for writing good rituals. This is the way that we teach our students, and you may agree or you may disagree. And I invite you to leave comments, and I'll tell you how at the end of this piece. So, tip number 1, you need to determine how many people are coming. And the reason for this is because what works for 30 will probably not work for 100. There may be exceptions, but for the most part, small ritual and large ritual have to be written 2 different ways. Tip number 2, and these are not in any particular order, by the way, but tip number 2, do a run-through of the ritual. Rehearse. What you need to do is actually stand up and walk through everything to make sure it works. Do you have the room to do what you want to do? Is it physically possible for people to do what you're asking them to do in the space that you have? Is the energy going to flow, or is it going to be too scattered? Walk through everything, almost like blocking out a play. Okay, run through the whole ritual, walking. If you're going to do something in the quarter, go over to that quarter and actually do it. Don't read it off the page. Actually do it. See how long it takes. Number 3, read everything out loud. Sometimes things that sound really good on paper turn out to be a tongue twister when you read them. And ask yourself, is it clear? Sometimes changing a few phrases or words can make the ritual flow better. Are your instructions clear? Are you able to pronounce all of the words easily? Number 4, does the energy flow naturally? Now, I've been to rituals where they've done meditation and they've done some activity. Usually, if you want to do a meditation and you want to do activity, it's best to do the activity first so that everybody expends their energy, and then do the meditation after, when everybody's ready to ground. Doing it in the reverse order, you may find that it just doesn't work. Once you get people grounded in a meditative state, then trying to get them to bounce up, bounce back, and do some dancing or running around, it doesn't always work. So take a look at your ritual after you've walked through it and see, does the energy flow naturally? Are you ebbing and flowing at the right spots? Number 5, make yourself a checklist. Now, people kid me about making lists because I'm a little obsessive about making lists, but in this case, you really need to do this. As you're reading through the ritual, make a checklist of everything that you will need. For example, if you're going to have your participants write something, then you're going to need to provide paper and, say, a pen. They're going to need light to see by. They're going to need something to write on. If your ritual is outside, are they writing on the ground? If it's inside, are they writing on the floor? If you are passing out paper and pens, who is passing them out? Are you doing it? Are you going to have other people doing it? Are you going to divide the circle into quarters, and then maybe the people who call in the quarters would also pass out the paper and pens? And then when you're done, who is collecting them? Will you have a central location where people can put the pens back themselves? Or are you going to have someone walking around collecting them? Or are you going to have people passing them around the circle? I mean, it may sound like I'm nitpicking, but these little details, having them all ironed out and thought through ahead of time, make the difference between writing a stress-free ritual and having to make decisions on the spot and having to make decisions on the fly. And that is really not the way you want to do things. You want it so smooth and every little detail figured out ahead of time so that you make it look easy. And for you, it will be a lot less effort. Doing all of this planning ahead of time is a lot less effort. And that brings me to number 6. Plan enough time into the ritual for all the little things, like passing around paper and pens. As in the prior example, these things take time. So make sure you plan for this so you're not rushing the important parts, especially for people who rent space and maybe they have a time limit to clean up and be out of there. So you don't want to be in the middle of ritual and all of a sudden realizing, wow, this is taking so much longer than I thought it would. I'm going to have to rush through the cakes and wine, or we're going to have to rush through the announcements or something else. You don't want to be in that position. So make sure as you're walking through the rehearsal that you actually plan in enough time for all the little things that are going to take part. Number 7, have a plan B. Always, always have a plan B. If you're having ritual outside and the weather turns bad, cold, or rainy, what are you going to do? Are you going to move the ritual inside? So what would have to be moved to accomplish this? Would you have to move furniture? Think about it. What would you have to do? And also, who can you get to help you? Another plan B is if you're having movement in the ritual, like, for example, dancing, doing a spiral dance, things like that, you're going to need to have a plan for people who have mobility issues or just can't move the way you're planning to have people move. Think about that in advance and have a plan for what they can do if they can't do what everybody else is doing. So always have a plan B in case things go wrong, because something will always go wrong. It's like guaranteed. Tip number 8, have minions. Now, I don't mean this in a subservient way, so don't anybody get offended. I mean that you need to have people to help you. You need to be able to delegate. Even if you are very used to putting on rituals all the time, you should ask people to assist. People want to be useful. They want to help, especially if you have someone that you know is coming and you can ask them in advance to help with something specific, like putting out feast after ritual or helping to clean up after ritual. Everyone in our community, by the way, helps clean up before they leave. It makes it fun, it makes it fast, and it makes it easier for the host or hostess, because really no one wants to have to spend 2 days cleaning up after they've hosted a ritual at their home. Another thing you can have people help is with parking. You can have a parking guru. You can have someone in charge of when people arrive. If they arrive and they're bringing something, you can have someone in charge of taking care of that. You can have someone in charge of where the food goes before ritual. Anything that you can delegate to other people so that you're not having to answer 6 questions at once or talk to 20 people at once is going to make your life less stressed. And it's going to seem like your ritual is so well put together and goes so smoothly. Now, tip number 9, rituals should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, I see you rolling your eyes. I do. But you have no idea how many rituals I've been to that didn't. And it would seem like common sense. It does to me too, but I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't something that I saw the need to mention. So let's go through them, right? The beginning, you're going to welcome people, you're going to explain what's going to happen, and you're going to give directions as needed. Leave the mystery, of course, but you want people to know what the heck is going on. The worst thing is to be in ritual and everyone is doing something and you have no idea what they're doing or why they're doing it or how it relates to the Sabbath or the Esbits. So explain a little bit, okay? You don't have to go into long, drawn-out explanations. Just explain. Like, for example, if your group is used to doing long invocations or using multiple languages, just explain to the participants, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to invoke the quarters in English, and then we're going to go back and we're going to invoke the quarters in Gaelic. Well, that's beautiful. People will love that. I've been to rituals where they've done that. I've also been to rituals where they did it and they didn't tell us that that's what they were doing. So when they went back around and they were invoking them in Gaelic, I was like, okay, are we invoking the quarters again? Or are we invoking deities now? I wasn't sure what was going on. And you know what? When people are not sure what's going on, it's really hard for them to be present in the moment. A little explanation will go a long way because you want everybody to participate, right? That's what they're there for. Now in the middle, Wicca is a participatory religion, so please have some part of the ritual where people can join in and participate. My pet peeve is having people sit and watch and not do anything. Now that's ritual theater, and yes, there's a place for that, but please tell folks in advance if that's what you're doing. I've done ritual for 80 people, for 100 people, and it's not ritual theater. They participate. There are many ways to get a large group of people to be part of the ritual. There's dancing, clapping their hands, making something small, braiding something, giving them a coin to toss, do a spiral dance, chanting, whatever. But there's something to do to make the magic happen. And this is a very key part for the people who are attending. And this is also where you get to shine. This is where you want to focus a lot of your attention. This is where you can get really creative and make a ritual that will have people talking about it for years to come. So leave them wanting more. Have one central theme to focus on, 2 at the most if they're very related. Don't try to throw everything but the kitchen sink into it. Get the message you want across and don't try to put too much together into one ritual. And if the energy can flow naturally from one activity to the next, that's even better. But don't go overboard. And then we come to the ending. So make sure whatever you opened, you close. Whatever you called in, you release. Whatever you invited, you thank and let go. Now, if you are doing an opening ritual for a festival and you plan to leave everything open for the weekend or for the length of the festival, that's normal. That's fine. Lots of events do that. But you'd be explaining that so everyone understands, and that's great. When someone opens or invokes something in a ritual and then doesn't close it down, sometimes people leave feeling uneasy or feeling like they have to do it. They don't feel balanced. So if there's a reason for doing it that way, just a quick couple of words of explanation are all that's needed. After all, the mystery is part of the experience, but people can't have a good experience if their brain is going, what's going on? Why are they doing this? Why is this happening? I don't understand. That means that they're not present to the ritual. All they are present to are their questions and their uneasiness, especially when just a little bit of explanation would have allowed them to fully participate. And that's what you invited them for. You want to provide someone with a satisfying ritual experience. And now, my last tip, tip number 10, and this is the one that people hate to do the most. Take the ritual to people that you trust. Hopefully they're good at writing ritual, and let them tear it apart. Let them tear it apart and really critique it. You may have to rewrite it several times. And really, that's okay. When you wrote your research paper or your report, right, you first have an outline, then you write a first draft, then you go through it and you edit it, then you edit it again, then you go through and you check for spelling, grammar, and punctuation errors, and then you have someone else read it to make sure you are making sense, and you might edit it again 3, 4, who knows how many times, until you get a polished, finished product that you are happy with. Now, I see no reason why ritual should be any different. A ritual is very much like a polished piece that you are going to publish, and as such, it probably needs to be edited a few times. When did you ever write something right off the top of your head and it was totally brilliant the first time? It's rare. I don't think I've ever done it. It's really rare. Writers of any kind will tell you that you have to edit multiple times, and the key is to take it to people whose opinion you trust and who have ritual experience. Tell them that you want it to critique it. In other words, you want them to be honest. And if they're your friends, they'll be kind, of course, but someone you can trust can tell you, well, this is pretty, but I don't think it's going to work, or I like this phrase, but this other one isn't clear. And you should be so grateful to hear this. Please don't get upset or be offended. This is valuable information that they're giving this to you. Most of us had to learn this by trial and error. So don't be easily satisfied. Read it over again and ask yourself, how can I make this better? These are my tips for writing what I consider to be good ritual. This is how we teach our students and how we always try to write our rituals. Now, you may disagree, and I would love to hear it if you do. Please write to me and let me know why you disagree and what you disagree with. Or if you have a tip I missed, please write to me and let me know what I missed. I will read your emails on the podcast. We can open up a discussion about it, because I think that there can never be too much discussion about writing good rituals and ways to improve our ritual skills. My email is ladybridget@gmail.com. That's LADYBRIDGET@gmail.com. Go ahead and write to me. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you disagree with. Give me some examples. I'd love to open a discussion. Thank you so much, and blessed be.
Summer shimmers, the harvest twinkles down, the press of the grape for the wine. First fruits overflowing, bright and red and so sweet. Last days for the growing, as the heart
Hi, this is Qabal, and welcome to FooDoo, and happy Beltane. Over the years, I've noticed that spice cakes have increasingly become part of Beltane celebrations. And these are usually a classic American chiffon cake that is leavened with baking powder and baking soda and flavored with strong spices like vanilla, cardamom, ginger, and cloves. They often have a little bit of Dutch cocoa or some kind of unsweetened chocolate in them. And most of them have kind of a liqueur like brandy or amaretto or sambuca, and sometimes they're all three. What they're trying to do is to raise that complex flavor of all those different spices and liqueurs. I've even seen a recipe that calls for Jägermeister. And like I said, it's really complex. It's a multi-flavored cake with a dozen or more ingredients. And frankly, I hate them all. They have too many flavors battling for attention. It takes an hour just to get the ingredients together, and because of the spices and the alcohol, you have to be careful with the eggs, and the sugar balance is always off because the spice set is too complex. Then you have to bake them, and the house smells like Christmas, and that's just perfect for Beltane. So, I thought we should look at another hated dessert that's easy to make and also uses some witchy techniques for infusing flavors, and that dessert is rice pudding. Now here's the deal. Rice pudding has a lot of different variations, which is actually good, I think. You can make it sweet, you can make it spiced, and you can make it even a little bit savory and add sweetness later. In France, rice pudding is rissolé, and that variant is actually less sweet and somewhat less rich than the recipe that I'll go over in this podcast, but I'll highlight how to make it. In Spanish and Cuban cuisine, it's arroz con leche, and it's a little sweeter than other versions, and it's also slightly heavier. In Italy, it's called risolate, and it's actually quite close to the Spanish version, but uses whole milk. So I'll try to go over what the basic recipe is and point out some of the differences across the three versions that I'm familiar with, and give you an idea on how to make each one. So the ingredients here are 1 lime and 1 orange, and we're really just going to use the peel of the lime and the orange. We're going to use 1/4 cup of heavy cream, 1/4 cup of water, 1 cinnamon stick, 3 star anise, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to use 2 cups of cooked rice, and I'll come back to that in a second, 1 12-ounce can of evaporated milk, and 1 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, a pinch of salt, say about 1/4 teaspoon, and also about 1/2 cup of raisins. And the raisins we're going to soak in rum, but you don't have to use rum. You can use any kind of liqueur, and actually you can just use orange juice if you want. So the first thing that we're going to do is to slice off the peel of the lime and the orange, and what we're trying to do is to just get the rind without any of the pith. This would be similar to using microplane, but what we're going to be doing at the end of this is really taking all this stuff out. So we want it in kind of large strips, and you can see the picture of what that looks like. We're going to take that 1/4 of heavy cream and we're going to cut it with that 1/4 cup of water. And then we're going to add the peel, the cinnamon stick, and the star anise, as well as the salt, into that mix of heavy cream and water. And to that we're going to add the 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and heat this, but heat it very carefully. What we're interested in is kind of raising the temperature until it's hot, say about 160 or 170 degrees, but we're not really interested in scalding or let alone boiling it. We don't want the temperature to get that high. What we're trying to do is to raise the temperature of the mixture so that the oils from the spices and the lemon and orange rind have a chance to infuse. So once we get it to about 160 degrees, we're going to stir it a bit, kind of press on the rind, and then we're going to cover it and put it aside. So inside of the same pot, put a cover on it, and then let it sit aside. I like to leave it for a good 30 minutes, but you can really leave it as long as you want and come back and taste it. About 10 minutes is really not enough. 20 minutes is just getting about good. 30 minutes I think is ideal, but if you want a stronger flavor, just keep tasting it until it has the strength of flavor of that combination of spices and rinds that you want. Now for the rice, we want 2 cups of cooked rice. And there are a couple of things about this that we should be aware of. The easiest thing to do is to use your Chinese dinner leftover and have 2 cups of that cooked rice, because that's somewhat glutinous. It's basically long grain rice, And if you're going to throw it away anyway, you might as well make rice pudding out of it. But there are other kinds of rice. If you use a fragrant rice like jasmine rice, then that flavor is going to carry over, and I think it's actually interesting. I've done it with jasmine rice. Long grain rice is the easiest to use. It's also the easiest to find. But you'll notice that in the French version as well as the Italian version, they use an arborio. An arborio you can find in the United States. It's just a small glutinous rice. You'll see that the grains are kind of roundish, and it's going to make a much thicker product. It has a lot more starch than the other kinds of rice. And how you cook any of these kinds of rice is you're going to add 2 tablespoons of salt to about 1 cup of rice, and then put in a saucepan and cover with just enough water, about a 1/4 inch more water than rice. Heat it up, bring it to a boil, and then drop the temperature to low, cover it, and in about 12 minutes it's all going to be done. So when that rice is done, you want to let it cool because you don't want to use this until it's at room temperature. So back to the infusion. So you've tasted it, make sure that it's at the flavor level that you want. Now you have your rice. So we would mix the rice and the infusion, but we're going to strain that infusion so we don't want to keep any of the chunks of the things that we put in there. Now we're going to add the 14-ounce can of the sweetened condensed milk into the rice and infusion mixture and stir it completely, and then we're going to bring that in that pot back to a boil. And this time we are going to try to get it to a boil because we want the rice to release its starch to thicken up the rice pudding. So it'll take a little bit of time. I actually suggest that you use medium heat and not bring it to a boil very rapidly, but kind of build it up. And once it's at a boil, start mixing it. And once you feel resistance in the spoon, then go ahead and add the raisins. You can add the rum or the orange juice that you soak them in there. But if you do, you're going to be thinning out the rice pudding. And so you'll want to give it a little bit more time to thicken up. Stir until you keep feeling resistance from the spoon, and you'll see that the rice pudding will become significantly thicker. Once that you have the rice pudding to the thickness that you want, then pull it off the heat and then add a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Stir it in and let it cool. Once that the rice pudding is completely cooled through, then it's ready to serve. Now there are a couple of things that you can do with serving it. You could add fruit with it, or you can whip some cream and actually lighten the rice pudding with the cream, or just serve the whipped cream on the side. Now to go back over the variations of the different kinds of rice pudding, you can follow the same infusion, but for a French style, you want to avoid evaporated milk and the condensed milk. You'll just use whole milk. And for that, you want about 3 cups of whole milk, and you'll mix that in with the infusion, and then add that milk infusion to the rice, and you prepare it in the same way. Now, if you use the arborio rice, there is one thing to be aware of, and that is that arborio rice actually takes better to baking rather than stovetop. So if you choose to make a risolate or the risole with arborio, you might consider pulling off the stovetop, and after you make the infusion, then mix everything together and put in a baking dish and set in the oven for about 300 degrees for a good 50 minutes or so. Fresh fruit is also an ideal accompaniment for rice pudding. You can make them with sugar coating, or you can serve them just as they are. And then the last thing to say is that with that infusion, if you wanted to avoid using the sweetened condensed milk, you can have a fairly successful product by using stevia, and use the stevia leaves to be part of the infusion, add them with the milk, and then you wouldn't add the sweetened condensed milk, you would add another 1.5 cups of whole milk. So with that, rice pudding is a simple comfort food with hundreds of variations, and I think it's a very good way to end a Sabbath celebration. Happy Beltane!
Hey everyone, this is Alpandia, and it's time for another one of Pandie's Pagan projects. Are you getting ready for Beltane, but you don't have a maypole to dance around? Never fear. With today's simple candle project, you can place your maypole in the center of your altar. To do this project, you will need Candles of some sort, whether they're tapers or pillar candles, is entirely up to you. Rubbing alcohol and a lint-free cloth, acrylic paints, thin bristled paint brushes, a surface to use for your color palette, and a cup of water for washing your brushes. Optional equipment for this project include candle painting medium and Mod Podge Sparkle Podge. You can go ahead and try and say that one 5 times fast. This will give your candles a little extra shimmer when you're done. You may also want to have some painter's tape and or rubber bands if you'd like to have a little more control over how your candles come out. This would allow you to apply the lines beforehand, then follow them as you paint. Or you could simply do what I do and just completely wing it. As an FYI, you do not have to have the candle painting medium. You can paint directly onto your candle with the acrylics without it. The painting medium may help your acrylics stick better, but it's definitely not required. So the first thing you'll do is prepare your surface. And to do that, you'll want to wipe your candle down with the rubbing alcohol and the lint-free cloth so that it's completely clean. Now we'll set up our palette of paints. If you're going to be using candle painting medium, this would be the time to start mixing it together with your colors that you're using according to the instructions on the bottle. Otherwise, just set up your colors in whatever pattern that you want on your palette. With a clean brush, you'll start from the top of the candle and ribbon your way down to the base. Be sure to turn your candle so that the ribbon flows from tip to base. It should sort of look like a snake is twining its way up your candle. Clean your brush and repeat this step for each color, making sure to twist in the opposite directions. You want to make sure that you've got counterclockwise and clockwise spins. You don't want all your ribbons flowing in the same direction. Just like on the maypole, you will want them to cross each other. Once you're finished, place your candle in a candle holder to dry. It can take anywhere from a few hours till the next day or so, depending on how much paint and medium you used and also what the humidity is in your house. After it's dry, you can coat it with a layer of the Sparkle Podge if you want to make it shiny. Now all that's left to do is charge your candles and place them on the altar for your Beltane ritual. I would love to see the candles you guys create. Feel free to head over to our Facebook page and leave a comment with your picture, or head over to our website, emlc.net, and leave your picture in the comments for this post. Have fun crafting. Blessed be.
I am king of the oak, for whom fires are stoked, and the earth is my bride, this Beltane. So be easy and free when you're thinking of me. I'm a man you done meet every day. So come fill up your glasses with brandy and wine. Whatever it costs I will pay. So be easy and free when you're drinking with me. I'm a man you done meet every day. Now let's light up the hills and we'll cure all our ills. May our clans be strengthened today. So be easy and free when you're leaping with me. I'm a man you don't meet every day. In a green wooded space share a lover's embrace. Bless the land with our passion and say, you'll be easy and free when you're loving with me. I'm a man you don't meet every day.
Lady Bridget, and we're here with Lord Riekin. And what are you going to talk to us about today?
We're going to be talking about pruning trees and shrubs by the moon. In other words, the timing of your spring pruning.
Can you tell us why it's necessary to prune trees?
It is necessary to prune trees because trees in the urban environment are not natural. Trees in their natural environment are in groups with their fellows. They support each other. They lean on each other. They help each other self-prune. In a forest environment, a tree tends to keep a single central leader with whorls of much smaller branches around them, which is a very strong form. Trees that in nature do stand out as individuals are normally genetically adapted to keep that same kind of form. We're going to be talking about broadleaf trees here. We're not talking about palm trees here either, because palm trees only have one growing tip, so there's not much way they can change.
So are you talking about like fruit trees?
Well, fruit trees, shade trees, we're mostly talking shade trees here. Fruit trees have their own set of rules. But shade trees grown in a natural stand, say a maple tree grown in a natural stand of maples, like we have parks around here, or at Sugar Sands Park, where they have stands of gumbo limbo. Well, stands of gumbo limbo at Sugar Sands Park don't look anything like the gumbo limbos that are planted along streets and in people's front yards down here.
That's true.
We almost call them character trees. They have such contorted forms to them oftentimes. The thing is that trees grown in our urban environment are not natural, and just like our animals don't know how to take care of themselves if they're suddenly in the wild, we have to take care of these trees. We have to prune out bad branching angles. A quick explanation: there's two types of buds on a tree, axillary and adventitious. Forget those words. Leaf bud and bark bud. A leaf bud is, if you ever had tomatoes, you have a leaf that's between a branch, or you have a bud between a branch and a leaf. And to keep strong growth on a central stem, you pinch out that bud. Well, every tree out there, if you walk up and look at a branch and a leaf attached to that branch, you will see a little tiny bud. And in the right set of circumstances, that bud is stimulated to become a new branch. In the forest environment, very few of those buds get stimulated to make new branches.
Because there's no sun.
There's no sun. And if an opening appears, then the tree immediately takes advantage of it by throwing out growth in the direction of that sunlight. So if there's damage on a tree, but if there's damage on another tree, it'll do that. If that tree gets damaged, a big branch breaks off and there's suddenly some sunlight exposed, the tree reacts by throwing energy to bark buds, temporary buds that surge very quickly out and throw sucker growth into that area to quickly replace the leaf area of the damaged branch, and to hopefully fill and occupy that area before something else has a chance to get in there. But when we take a tree that's been bred by nature for 3 to 4 million years to do that, and we suddenly take that seedling and we plant it out in the middle of our front yard with 30 feet of open space around it in all directions, it is completely stimulated to grow in all directions.
And that's bad
and
for
you
the tree.
get, in many cases, many multiple trunks. And multiple trunks are extremely weak. They are prone to splitting. People think, oh, trees just fuse and seal. Well, they don't. A branch, you can start out as a branch, but as it starts heading up for the sunlight, it will begin taking on the characteristics of a secondary trunk. Those trunks push against each other its whole life. I have seen 60-foot mahogany trees literally split in half in a 5-mile-an-hour wind in the spring from the turgor pressure of the rising sap. Literally split in half with a sound like a pistol shot and come crashing to the ground. Luckily, it was in a parking lot with no trees around it. But had it been later in the day, it would have crushed 7 or 8 cars. And the same thing holds true with the house. If your trees have too many trunks at bad branching angles, it can cause a problem. So we need to prune, both for size, because the native trees in South Florida learned 100,000 years ago to duck.
Keep down from the wind.
Yes. Slash pines, you've ever heard the term Dade County slash pine. A Dade County slash pine grows about 35 feet high and is a rather stocky tree, and it has a very high percentage of strong heartwood. Another slash pine grown up in the Panhandle, same species of tree, there it goes 110 feet high on average, 125 feet on a good day. Single leader with a very large percentage of white sapwood and a very small percentage of the
Heartwood?
rosin-filled heartwood, because the number of hurricanes that go crashing into that area didn't breed them. I mean, if you grow too fast, you get slapped down, you don't have a chance to generate offspring. It was the stunted short guy who had a chance to spread his seed. So South Florida, the trees were really short. Other parts of the country, they weren't. Same exact species. It follows through species after species down here.
So, pruning with the moon, what does that mean?
Pruning with the moon. In other words, timing your pruning to coincide with the waxing and waning of the moon to have the desired effect from your pruning. If you want to prune shrubs, you're probably out to get a lot of new foliage. And so you want to prune with the waxing moon, because the waxing moon, the saps and the nutrients are coming up from the base, and it will quickly stimulate a lot of growth on a lot of buds, and you will get a lot of foliage. And most shrubs grow their flowers on their current season foliage, so you will get more flowering as well. Obviously, more stems, more growing tips, more flowers, as well as more foliage. If you're pruning a tree, you want to reduce the size of the tree, or you want to control the tree either for size or for structure. And if you trim a tree, if you cut branches on a tree when the moon is waxing, then you're going to get excessive bleeding. Excessive bleeding leads to excessive fungal activity, and it opens larger wounds for fungal and other diseases to enter the tree.
Because the sap is rising at that time.
Because the sap is rising. If you trim a tree on the waning of the moon, then the stems are more dried out, as it were. You cut it, you don't get a lot of bleeding. You have a window of opportunity there for the open wound in the tree, the open arteries, as it were, in the tree to shrivel up and dry out a little bit, which makes it much less likely to end up with fungal infections and various diseases. And then by the time the moon turns back to waxing, it's been effectively stopped. And it also will lead to less sprouting, which is normally a desirable thing when you're reducing the size of a tree or you're redirecting the growth of a tree. It is important to control the growth of a tree and to direct the growth of a tree, because we take trees from the forest and we put them in the urban environment, which is completely alien. That is, they have none of their comrades around them. They're spaced 25 feet or 30 feet apart instead of being spaced 5, 6, 7, 10 feet apart, all in clusters. So we have to thin out bad branching angles and things of this nature. We're not going into pruning. Then are the techniques of pruning. For that, type in a Google search for Dr. Ed Gilman, Gilman. It will take you to the website of Professor Ed Gilman, University of Florida. It's a 1,200-page website on pruning trees. Why his website and not somebody else's website? Because Dr. Gilman is the man who was tasked with figuring out what happens when you hat rack a tree or prune a tree wrong. And the results of his 6 years of research into that led to the creation of the NSI 300 standards, which are the national standards for tree trimming. I have the good luck to live in Florida. I attend an average of 4 seminars a year with Dr. Gilman. I have another one coming up. I've already been to one this year, and I have another one coming up here in another month or so. Dr. Gilman is retiring later this year. We don't expect that to slow him down any after 35 years or so at the University of Florida. His website is still one of the most comprehensive. Don't let the size of it scare you, because a lot of it is individual pages on different species of trees. But the techniques are everything you need to know about trimming your trees to properly correct them for size and shape. That's not really the point of this particular podcast piece. Here, what we're going to be talking about, the timing, and the timing with the moon. There are 2 ways to calculate the timing with the moon. One is with the synodic lunar cycle, which is the one everybody in the pagan community is familiar with. That is new moon, waxing moon, full moon, waning new moon, dark moon or new moon. Start with the dark moon or the new moon, whichever way you want to call it. Either way, it is the 3 days of the new moon when you can't see the moon, which is why it's also called dark moon. And then you have your waxing moon, then you have the 3 days of the full moon, and you have the waning moon, and then you're back to dark moon or new moon, whichever way you want to look at it. It's one and the same. Why do I say there are 3 days? Because the moon might not rise full, but by the time it sets on the first day of the 3 days, it's full. It rises full on the second day, and it sets full on the second day, and it rises full on the third day, and by the time it sets, it's not full anymore. That's why we always refer to the 3 days of the full moon or the 3 days of the new moon. The other way that you measure this is the periodic lunar cycle, which uses the same set of concepts. It has perigee, which is the equivalent of the new moon. It has the ascending, which is the equivalent of the waxing. It has the apogee, which is the comparison with the full moon when it's furthest away from Earth. And then it has the descending, which is the waning. And it works much the same way. Those two cycles, as it happens this month, those two cycles are almost perfectly synced up. There are times when they can be 180 degrees out of sync, and there's a whole lot of time when they just kind of do their thing somewhere along the line in there. And that is where you get all these strange times in the Old Farmer's Almanac, why they tell you the best time for pruning. And that's kind of why we're doing this article right now, because the best time for pruning this spring is going to be coming up on April the 22nd through April the 28th, because you will have both a moon cycle, which is waning, and a periodic cycle, which is descending. So if you're going to make big cuts, you're going to be cutting branches in trees, the response of the tree will be the best. You can reduce the size of the tree, you can cut out crossing branches, bad branching angles and such, and it will do the least damage to the tree. Always remember to keep your pruning dose under 25%. Got to get that in there. You can prune for fullness. That is, if you want to prune your hedges, you want to prune them when the moon is waxing, because you want to generate more leaves, you want to generate more flowers. The reason I said a moment ago when you said fruit trees is because fruit trees have their own set of rules. Some trees fruit only on the current season's growth, flowering too. Think of a crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtles, you tip out the crepe myrtles every year because it's only on the new growth that you're going to get the flowers in the spring for every year. They don't come up on last year's growth. On the other hand, an apple tree, your flowers come out on the 1-year-old growth. If you are always cutting off all your 1-year-old growth, whoops. In fact, what do you do with apple trees? You actually are cutting out the sucker growth. The sucker growth is the less than 1 year growth. It takes a lot of energy away, and it's not going to produce you any flowers or fruit. And unless that sucker branch is someplace where you want it to be, in which case you're just committing those resources for future production, then you want to take the suckers out. For that, you need to just research each and every type of tree and each and every type of shrub. If you got to figure out, think about rose bushes. You cut them back to nothing, and then they push out lots and lots of new growth, and then you get beautiful flowers. If you don't cut your roses back, you'll still get some flowers, but you won't get nearly as many as if you do when you cut them back every spring.
And it gets very straggly, too, if you
and
don't
they
cut
get
it back.
very straggly, yes.
Yeah.
And they get very weak because as they get large, their angles aren't good, they break up. So this is not a gardening course here. I'm just pointing out to you the key part of this is that using the moon to prune with, you want to time your pruning so that if you're cutting a big branch, you want to do it when the moon is waning or when the moon is coming back towards the earth from being furthest out. Or if you want to fill in a hedge or cut back a bush, say a gardenia, you want to do it. No, the gardenia, though, again, gardenia goes from last year's growth. I cut my gardenia last year and got a whole lot of sprouting, and I won't touch it this spring because it's getting ready to blossom and bloom. We'll have lots of blooms for May 1st. Right now they're just buds, but I guarantee on May 1st, you can mark your calendar by it, that thing will be in full bloom. I'm just going to keep pounding on the point that if you want to cut branches to improve the health of your tree, you do it when the moon is waning. If you want to cut shrubbery to bush and fill out, you do it when the moon is waxing. You do not cut on the 3 days of the new moon. You do not cut on the 3 days of the full moon. There are people who say you cut on the 3 days of the full moon, particularly, you'll get wonky, weird growth. Stems will go in all kinds of odd directions. I've never really found that to be the case, but I do avoid cutting during the 3 days of the new moon. I avoid cutting during the 3 days of the full moon because it doesn't show. And for myself, I don't like to cut during the first or third quarter for that matter. If I want to cut for fullness of growth, I like to cut in the second quarter. If I want to trim my trees for structural pruning, I like to cut in the fourth quarter. I like to double down on my bed, as it were. Mm-hmm. If Saturday and Sunday happens to come just as we're moving from the third into the fourth quarter, I'll get it done because, Saturday is Saturday. You got to get your work done when you can. But I will often choose to not do it the Saturday before because it's just too early in the cycle. Mm-hmm. And then when it rains, I kick myself. But that's okay.
So let me ask you this, because we have listeners in a lot of different areas.
Right.
Not everybody who listens to the podcast lives in South Florida or even Florida at all. Mm-hmm. Does it make a difference if you live somewhere away from the equator?
It does. I have been talking as though I barely touched on the periodic cycle of the moon because in South Florida, it's not particularly important. The full moon cycle is much, much more important down here. The further away from the equator you are, the more important the periodic cycle becomes in your calculation. That's why you see such strange times and dates in the Old Farmer's Almanac sometime. Literally, here it's not terribly important. Just follow the one, but you need to double down. If the further away from the equator you get, the more the need to double down. If you're up in the northern half of the northern hemisphere, then you really need to take both into account and try to pick a period of time. Usually it'll be around 7 days that you'll be able to find a time when both the moon is waning and the periodic cycle are both coinciding so that it will keep the sap down.
And how do they find that information?
Websites galore. There's no lack. All you have to do is type in lunar cycle or periodic cycle, and everybody out there has a calculator for it.
Oh, good. And now you said this happens once a month. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that whenever you need to prune, there'll be at least 1 or 2 days during that month when you can prune.
More likely there'll be about 7 days during that month that are either going to be best for either your hedge trimming or for your tree trimming.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think everybody can kind of, squeeze it in during a 7-day period.
Hopefully, yep. And, once you get your spring cleaning done, as it were, you don't need to do too much more cutting on your trees, so you can mostly at that point start focusing on keeping your hedges in good shape. For instance, my hedge is really bushy and full out there. I don't need it to get bushier and fuller, so I will trim my hedge once the moon starts waning. My hedge is a little shaggy at the moment, but I am not tempted to go out there and trim it this week. I'm going to wait another week before I trim my hedge because I really want my hedge to not grow. It's full, thick, it does its job, so if I trim it in 2 more weeks, I'll be able to get by for 3 months. If I trim it today, I'll be trimming it again next month.
Wow.
So that's the other side of that coin. And I used to be a private gardener with about 200 homes. And that's when I did my research and I tracked the moon. And I found that if I cut somebody's hedge during the waning of the moon, I usually didn't have to cut it the next month at all. Whereas just if I had cut it 3 days earlier during the still waxing period of the moon, I would be out there trimming new growth like crazy the next month. And I tracked this over 200 homes for a long time and became absolutely and completely convinced that the moon is by far the most important thing when it comes to timing your pruning. And you can save yourself a lot of work over the course of a year by following those simple rules.
Well, thank you so much. That's very enlightening and very instructional.
You're very welcome.
Hi, everyone. Before we begin our last segment of this episode, we'd like to thank you for listening. Putting a podcast together is a time-consuming labor of love, but knowing that someone is listening to our hard work and hopefully gaining something from it makes it worthwhile. Would you let us know you like the podcast by going to our website at emlc.net, click on the podcast tab, and write a comment. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to hear more of on our podcast. And even better, why not leave us a rating on iTunes? Ratings help us become more visible to more people. It's not about ego, it's all about service. Thank you, and blessed be.
Hello, my name is Shaylee, and welcome to Night Witch, a mismannered segment for all Wiccans, witches, and pagans alike. Today's topic is participation. Ever go to a ritual where you're raising energy and only part of the circle is participating? Some look bored, some look unsure of what to do, some just don't seem that into what you're doing. Ever been in a circle where you're one of those people who's not participating, for whatever your reason? You can feel the energy languish. You can see the effects it has on the circle, but there's nothing you can do about it, right? Wrong. You can make sure you participate. You're already there for the experience, so please participate, especially when asked. Participation in ritual raises energy. Having someone not participate can be distracting and confusing. It stagnates the energy and is considered rude. But I get it. Sometimes you don't know the chant, you can't dance around the circle, you don't feel certain of what you're supposed to be doing. It happens. Either way, you should always try. So you don't know the words to the chant. You can hum, can't you? You can sing the words you do recognize. Can't dance? Clap, move, sway. Find merriment in those who are dancing. Be present in the moment. Don't stand there silently doing nothing. If some type of working is being done which requires you to participate, don't be rude or dismissive. Try to be open to it, even if it's something that you're not used to doing. Some rituals will include a group discussion about experiences in the ritual. It's okay to share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with, but you should remain attentive even if you choose not to share. The point is to add your energy to the ritual. If all you can do is be attentive in circle, you are still participating. You are still keeping the spiritual flow moving. So remember, whether we're all gathering to honor the gods, celebrate the seasons, mark the turning of the wheel, perform rituals, simply to enjoy each other's company, or whatever the reason be, we are gathering, and we need to be considerate of each other. So enjoy yourselves, and remember to be a nice witch.
Strike the corners, call the quarters, unfurl your banners, and peace tie your blades. Lord and Lady, ancient grove, silent witness to promises made, and into the binding wood we shall go. Blessings of sky, blessings of stone, blessings of dew, and the flame as it grows, and into the binding wood we shall go. Eye to eye, unbound by space. Hand to hand, we share this joy with friend and forest, and goddess's grace. And into the binding wood we shall go, blessings of sky, blessings of stone, blessings of dew, and the flame as it grows. And into the binding wood we shall go. Hand in hand, my heart to yours. Love will bind us forever and a day. Kiss and embrace as lady and lord. I'll be your chalice, you be my blade. And into the binding wood we shall go, blessings of sky, blessings of stone, blessings of dew, and the flame as it grows. And into the binding wood we shall go. Into the binding wood we shall go. Blessings of sky, blessings of stone, blessings of dew, and the flame as it grows. And into the binding wood we shall go.